Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever looked at the timeline of human history, you've probably been sold a very comforting, very straightforward story. It goes something like this. We started out as primitive foragers. Eventually, we discovered farming. We settled down and boom, we built modern civilization. It's usually presented as this seamless, glorious ascent from the dirt right up to the stars. But when we actually look at the hard data and the historical record from that transition period, a pretty fascinating paradox emerges. So today, we're going to look really closely at the actual mechanics of this massive shift. Okay, let's dive right into this. Did the agricultural revolution actually improve human life? Our immediate instinct is to say, well, yeah, of course it did. We have sprawling cities, the internet, grocery stores fully stocked. But if we zoom in on the lives of the actual everyday humans who lived through this massive transition, the evidence strongly suggests that farming wasn't exactly the automatic instant upgrade for humanity that we've always assumed it was. And that brings us to a total bombshell of a thesis from historian Yuval Noah Harari. He famously argues that the agricultural revolution was, quote, history's biggest fraud. Now, hold on, just to be completely clear here, he doesn't mean it was some conscious mistake or a deliberate scam orchestrated by a shadowy group of early farmers. Nobody just woke up one day and decided to make life harder for everyone. Instead, as you'll see, it was a wildly complex, entirely unintended biological and societal trap that we essentially walked right into. Section 1. The Hunter-Gatherer World. To really understand the trap we fell into, we first have to bust this huge myth that our foraging ancestors lived ignorant, miserable lives. Just think about the sheer scope of knowledge required to survive back then. These societies weren't just wandering aimlessly around the woods. They possessed a vast, highly practical knowledge of their local environment. A typical hunter-gatherer could identify hundreds of different plant species. They knew exactly which roots were edible and which were poisonous. They tracked complex animal migrations. They anticipated seasonal weather shifts. And they even utilized the medicinal properties of local flora. In a lot of ways, their practical knowledge of their immediate surroundings arguably rivals or even totally surpasses the highly specialized but super narrow knowledge of a modern urbanite today. And this brilliantly illustrates one of the core paradoxes of the whole transition. Think about a mobile foraging diet. It was incredibly diverse. We're talking dozens of different fruits, nuts, roots, fish, and insects. It provided this massive, wide spectrum of nutrients. But then look at the sedentary farming diet. It became heavily dependent on just a handful of staple crops, stuff like wheat, rice, and maize. Now, yes, farming absolutely produced significantly more total calories per acre, which, don't get me wrong, is a massive achievement. But for the individual human being, it resulted in a nutritionally poorer, super monotonous, monocultural diet. And this specific nutritional shift really sets the stage for a truly fascinating evolutionary perspective. Section 2. Who domesticated whom? It's so important to realize that the emergence of agriculture wasn't just a one-and-done event. It actually happened gradually and entirely independently all over the globe. You had wheat and barley popping up in the Fertile Crescent, rice and millet in China, maize in Mesoamerica, and potatoes in the Andes. This wasn't some coordinated technological invention rolled out by an ancient dictator. The fact that it happened completely independently in all these different disconnected regions really proves it was a biological phenomenon at its core. Now, what's really interesting about this is how it completely flips our usual perspective. We always proudly brag that humans domesticated wheat, right? But what if we look at history purely from the perspective of the plant? Harari suggests that actually, perhaps wheat domesticated humans. Think about it for a second. Before agriculture, wheat was just this obscure little grass confined to a tiny sliver of the Middle East. Then suddenly, within just a few millennia, it's growing all over the entire planet. To really appreciate how wheat pulled off this absolute evolutionary masterpiece, just look at the sequence of events. Step 1. Humans literally break their backs, clearing entire forests and plowing fields, just for wheat. Step 2. Humans are hauling water under a blazing sun and fighting off pests, just for wheat. Step 3. Humans are building fences and guarding the fields from predators all day long. And the result of all our hard work? Step 4. The wheat population completely explodes globally. Humans suddenly took on this immense, repetitive, back-breaking labor just to ensure the reproductive success of a single plant species. From a purely evolutionary standpoint, wheat played us like a fiddle. Section 3. The demographic trap. So, you're probably wondering, why didn't humans just drop their plows, throw up their hands, and go back to the forests? Well, the answer is this incredibly rigid, unstoppable cause and effect loop. Step 1. Farming yields more total calories. Because there are more calories available, step 2 happens. More children survive infancy. That naturally leads to step 3, a rapid increase in the overall population. But now, because you've got way more mouths to feed, you hit step 4. Society needs even more food. So what do? You clear more land, you plant more wheat, and the whole cycle just repeats itself. By the time a village actually realized farming was much harder work than foraging, their population had already grown by 20%. They literally couldn't simply abandon the fields and go back to gathering. There were just too many people alive now. They were, as step 5 shows, securely locked into agricultural expansion. It was a true demographic trap. And man, the archaeological record proves that getting locked into this lifestyle came with some incredibly severe consequences for the individual. The skeletons literally tell a grim story here. When researchers examine early agricultural remains, they find significantly increased dental disease and huge signs of severe nutritional stress. Also, because early farmers relied heavily on a single crop, they were incredibly vulnerable to devastating famines if the weather suddenly turned bad. Plus, living in crowded, permanent settlements led to the rapid spread of infectious diseases, something foragers rarely dealt with. And the bones themselves actually show skeletal markers of severe repetitive labor. So, while the human species grew massively in pure numbers, individual health, freedom, and mobility took a sharp, sharp decline. Section 4. The price of civilization. It's definitely a heavy thought. But let's move to the macro level and see how this builds into literally everything we recognize as modern society today. It all stems from step 1, a food surplus. Because a single farmer could now produce enough food for several people, it triggered step 2, occupational specialization. Suddenly, not everyone had to farm all day anymore. You could actually have full-time toolmakers, soldiers, and priests. This newfound specialization inevitably led to step 3, the creation of institutions to manage all these different specialized groups. And finally, that brings us to step 4, the formation of complex states. Producing that extra food laid the exact structural foundation for all human civilization. But, as you might guess, this massive new civilization came with a profound structural change. There's a really stark divide that emerges here. On the top, you have the resource controllers, the kings, the priests, the military elites, and the administrators. And on the bottom, the resource producers, the farmers, the laborers, and the domesticated animals doing the actual physical work. For the very first time in human history, the concept of private property and food storage meant that resources could actually be hoarded. And think about it. If you control the granary, you control the army, and you control the taxes. This agricultural surplus led absolutely directly to the extreme wealth inequality and the rigid social classes that we still grapple with today. Now, managing all of this brand new inequality and massive food surplus required entirely new technologies. Suddenly, you had to draw explicit land ownership boundaries, you had to systematically collect and distribute grain taxes, record and enforce debts, and basically run massive bureaucracies. And that actually leads to one of the most fascinating historical ironies ever. Writing wasn't initially invented so someone could compose beautiful poetry or record deep philosophical thoughts. Nope. It was actually invented as a purely administrative tool, just to track agricultural wealth and taxes. The whole information revolution was basically born out of the sheer need to manage the agricultural surplus. Section 5. The paradox of progress. So we've seen how agriculture trapped early humans into much harder labor, lowered their individual health, created extreme societal inequality, and literally invented bureaucracy. So the crucial point here is that we really need to separate two very different concepts. On one hand, you have evolutionary success. But this biological metric, meaning more total population, more copies of DNA spreading across the globe, the agricultural revolution was just a staggering, undeniable victory for Homo sapiens. But look at the flip side, individual happiness. If we measure progress by personal freedom, diverse daily experiences, and the sheer absence of suffering and disease, the picture is frankly much darker. Evolution measures reproductive success. It honestly does not care at all about human happiness. We essentially traded the latter just to achieve the former. Which leaves us with a final, really lingering question to ponder. Is the success of a species necessarily the happiness of its individual members? The historical data from the agricultural revolution strongly suggest they are not the same thing at all. It's a wildly provocative thought, and it really forces us to reconsider everything we value when we casually talk about human advancement. As we continue to build and expand our modern civilization today, I think it's absolutely worth asking ourselves, are we building a world that just creates more of us? Are we actually building a world that is fundamentally better for us? Thanks for exploring this explainer with me today.
Welcome to the Digital Academy of Enriching Arts. Here, we cross the boundaries of time to explore the greatest triumphs of human creativity. But to keep this journey going, we need a little help from you.
If you enjoy diving deep into the masterpieces of literature and philosophy, be sure to hit that like button. It helps us bring these timeless stories to more people. To ensure you never miss our latest explorations into the breathtaking worlds of classical music and fine art, hit subscribe and ring the bell. And if you want to help us build a community of true art lovers, share this channel with your friends. The Academy is always accepting new students.
Welcome to the Digital Academy of Enriching Arts. Here, we cross the boundaries of time to explore the greatest triumphs of human creativity. But to keep this journey going, we need a little help from you.
If you enjoy diving deep into the masterpieces of literature and philosophy, be sure to hit that like button. It helps us bring these timeless stories to more people. To ensure you never miss our latest explorations into the breathtaking worlds of classical music and fine art, hit subscribe and ring the bell. And if you want to help us build a community of true art lovers, share this channel with your friends. The Academy is always accepting new students.